But the thing
So
is that
exactly.
even
Yeah.
Prabhupada, we should follow the Acharya and
Yeah.
not, we don't follow a Yendra, we follow Prabhupada. This will go on for 10,000 years. I mean, what is a Yendra going to be the standard for kirtan for the next 10,000 years? You see,
Not him. I was
he
just saying,
can't
Prabhu,
he
his
can't do that
melody.
because
Hmm. Hmm.
he can't do that. So, but Prabhupada can. You
Prabhupada
see, the
cannot.
whole thing about,
Prabhu.
yeah, right.
Amen.
The sectarianism means we never, you see, I was saying that the pure devotee speaks, the next person hears it, then he tells somebody, then he tells somebody, he tells somebody. That's like all these gurus or like all these people in ISKCON. He says it to one person and then they keep on degrading it down within one lifetime. You can see in my lifetime how much has been destroyed, right? Disturbed. But if it's coming straight from Prabhupada each time, then there's no way to disturb it. In other words, if Prabhupada is a living acharya for 10,000 years, people will hear him for 10,000 years. No difficulty,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah, yeah, Prabhu.
Yeah. So that means that it will never degrade. All you need is a little temple or a big temple with elected GBC and individually incorporated. Nobody can, with an individually incorporated temple, nobody can say, I'm in charge of this from the outside. The only person in charge of it is the temple president, right?
Yeah, bro. Temple presidents are okay, but yeah, I guess you can read Prabhupada books and it's already clear. So, temple president is just to guide you, right? If you are sincere in your chanting, Prabhupada will guide you in your books only. It will
Oh, well,
automatically come.
he said that, yes. He said the only reason he wrote his books is so that people will know why they should chant.
Yes, exactly. So, when you chant, automatically that book comes up. Automatically, your answers are cleared in your mind. Automatically,
Yeah,
you get those scriptures. That's the point. Yeah.
exactly. And that's called Siddhanta,
Yeah.
conclusion. The conclusion
Exactly.
of the books is chanting. That's what the
Yeah.
conclusion is. The
Hmm.
Upanishad, the Bhagavad Gita. So, but I came up with this starvation diet for books idea, is that all
Hmm.
you need is the Upanishad, the Bhagavad Gita as it is, the Krishna book, not the whole Srimad Bhagavatam, just the Krishna book, and the book, The Teachings of Lord Chaitanya. You don't need all those books of Chaitanya Charitamrita. It's good reading,
Yeah.
but you can do
Yeah.
without it. And you can do without the Bhagavatam, all those long pastimes. All you need is the Krishna book. And you see, then you get the whole idea. So that's a handful of books that cost you $20 for all of them. That's all you need. But in order to enrich the field, Prabhupada published an entire Srimad Bhagavatam, or most of it, I should say, and the entire Chaitanya Charitamrita. And with these books in such detail, then it is possible to elaborately understand. But here, I think is a point that you're making, is that if you get caught up in reading the books and not chanting, you think you're going to make a lot of advancement and you know all the right pronunciation of Sanskrit. No, it's not going to help you.
No, Prabhu, you won't understand those books, right? You would understand those books like a material guy if you're not chanting properly. That can
Exactly.
be, yeah.
So, but the thing is that once you're chanting, chant. Lord Chaitanya was a great scholar, but his guru said, you're not qualified. They said to Radha and Krishna in the form of Lord Chaitanya, my guru told me I'm a fool. I should not study books. He said I should just chant Hare Krishna. That's what the Lord Chaitanya said that his guru said to him. So why do we think we're so much more advanced than Lord Chaitanya?
Yes.
And
Correct.
he was an outstanding top scholar in his youth up until 16 years old. Brilliant scholar. He could defeat anybody, of course, being Radha and Krishna. How could he not? So that's the point. The ultimate conclusion is chanting, and that brings up the touchiest of all the touchy spots. Chanting must be done on Sankirtan in the streets. That's why Lord Chaitanya said every town and village, not every house or temple in the town and village, and shut the doors because it will annoy the neighbors. Not like that. We must go out. You and I right now, we can't do that, but we can set the format so that in the future, everyone who becomes a devotee will say, our mission is not to sit and study all these books. We'll read them, yes, but our mission is to go out into the streets chanting everywhere. And not crazy ba 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 kirtan, but Prabhupada's beautiful kirtans, uplifting. So when people hear us chanting, they will think they are hearing Prabhupada. And when they think they're hearing Prabhupada, then they will want to become devotees. And when they want to become devotees, they can incorporate their house or their apartments or any building or factory into being an ISKCON temple. When that happens, then GBC will come in, elected GBC will come in and help them set it up. And once they've set it up, they can preach and chant themselves. Then they will then encourage others to go out and open up other houses and other apartments and other buildings to be temples. That's the mission of Lord Chaitanya, and that's the way it was done during the time that Hayagriva wrote a book called The Hare Krishna Explosion. Every day, practically, new temples were being created. When I took initiation, there was maybe 4 temples. 1 year later, 68, September 68, September 69, there were 17 temples. And that was coming out of nowhere. How many devotees in each temple? Maybe 4, 6, 10, maybe 15 or 20. But as soon as you got 20, then they would go out and open new temples. Why would they be crowding up the temple by just being there? Why wouldn't they go and open more temples? And every temple would be based on Sankirtan, chanting in the streets.
Jai. Hari, 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 Hari Bol. Jai.
Can I give you a quick example of that, by the way?
Go ahead, bro. Go ahead. Sure. Yeah.
Okay. I was in Columbus, Ohio. That was the same trip that we saw when I saw Prabhupada in a lotus flower in the garden when it was just about to just about to drizzle rain a little bit. Yeah, I could see him and what he looked like in the lotus flower. But that's not the same thing as when he's dressed in his acting like he's, a Indian man like that. That's really public that he was doing, but it was a glimpse. And so in that same trip, they dropped me off in a town, a college town near Columbus. Just dropped me off in the street. I think I was alone. I think I was by myself. Yeah. And what happened is I got out and I went to a church. It was like Saturday or something. I said, is it okay if we use your cooking facility to cook a vegetarian feast for tomorrow? And they said, sure. And I said, well, I should pay you something? And they said, no, not necessary. And so I went out in the park by myself and I led kirtan by myself, chanted, and got people there in the park to chant with me till we had a group of people sitting around me in the park chanting. It wasn't that unusual back then. I'm not that special, but I did it. And I was chanting in the park. And I kept asking for donations and telling them the next day there's going to be a feast. I didn't have any money. But I went to the church and asked if we could use their facility. I didn't have even a penny as far as I recall. Didn't even have any pockets to put it in. I was very good at Dodi. So people donated, maybe totally $10, $15, $20, something like that. I went to the store, bought the ingredients, went to the church, cooked the prasadam, came out the next day with paper plates and distributed. And we had kirtan again, took more collection, and distributed the prasadam. That is how ISKCON can be actually spread. One man
Jai. Yeah.
sits in the park chanting, and then
Hari. Yeah.
gets donations, gets a place to cook the prasadam. At churches back then, they let people do things like that as long as you wash the pots afterwards, of course. And we did all of like that. I didn't know a single soul in that town. When I left and came back to Columbus, I had able to give Prabhupada $50. I started out with no money. I handed Prabhupada $50 from the collection the night before, and the collection during the feast. And I was lecturing from the Bhagavad Gita, preaching. That's Krishna consciousness can be spread unlimitedly. In that way, Krishna consciousness can be spread unlimitedly all over the world. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So
Now,
Vinayak Prabhu is also, yeah.
People like
Say
us,
something.
I cannot do that right now. I'm on the older side. I could do it, but I think I'd be better spending my time doing what I'm doing right now, is encouraging others. Until we finally get the idea, why not? Let me go out and preach in a strange city, chanting Hare Krishna by myself, or 2 or 3 people, 4 or 5 people, chant, and then distribute prasadam, then take a collection, and then sell some literature, sell back to Godhead, sell a few books, and don't get stuck on it. Go to the next village, go to the next park, some other town, or someplace in the same town, a part of another park in a different part of the town. But anyhow, I'm going on a lot, but do you get the idea?
Yeah, bro. Yeah. I got your point totally. Yeah. So, bro, I guess Vinayak Prabhu has just joined. He wants to say something. Hari Bol.
Oh, yes. Who joined?
Our dear devotee from Japan. Hari Bol.
Oh, Vinayak. Haribol Prabhu, my obeisances to you. Please enlighten us.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, please accept my humble obeisances.
Give
It
us
was
the
very
mercy.
enlightening to hear your experiences from those times about you doing it single-handedly. And
There was no GBC at that time.
so it was
Otherwise,
like
they would have wanted to control everything. But there was no GBC, just devotees on the street. Each devotee was as good as a temple. Well, go ahead, Vinayak. You want to say, please.
What year was it, like 1971 or 69?
It was 1969.
Exactly my question.
Which year was it? 1969.
Acha.
I think in the autumn, because Prabhupada was in Columbus, Ohio. We had a big kirtan and a big lecture in the University of Columbus where Hayagriva was teaching. And they filled the whole auditorium. The people in the auditorium became so ecstatic, they wanted to hear the kirtan. Allen Ginsberg was there in Prabhupada. Allen Ginsberg was playing harmonium and Prabhupada was leading the kirtan. And the audience was so excited, they wanted to dance. But how can they dance? They're sitting in an auditorium, right? Right? It's like a theater, movie theater. They're sitting in their seats. How could they dance? You know what they did? They got up and danced on the arms of the theater seats. So they were dancing up and down on top of the arms of the theater seats. As well as in the aisles and in front and stuff like that. It was very ecstatic. Prabhupada was going to have a microphone, but they didn't bring all the equipment, a dangling sort of microphone that you have around your throat, but they didn't bring the clamp for it. So he was stuck. So Allen Ginsberg, being a hippie and everything is equal sort of guy, said to Srila Prabhupada.
Then you gave your Brahmin said.
Very zen. He said, Srila Prabhupada, I will give you my shoelace, which is what his idea was. The humble shoelace will become around Prabhupada's neck so that he can lead the most sacred sound vibration. Needless to say, Prabhupada did not find that to be a very attractive thought. So he turned to me with almost a ferocious look in his eyes. And he said, Narayana? I said, yes, Srila Prabhupada. That's before I was named Vishwakarma, I think. Yes, Srila Prabhupada. You must sacrifice your sacred thread. I had just taken Brahmin initiation a couple of months before. So for me to part with my sacred thread was like having my tonsils taken out or something. It's the last thing I wanted to do. But Prabhupada, you must sacrifice your sacred thread. So I took off my sacred thread and handed it to him. And he gave it to me afterwards, after he used it to hold his microphone. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
Hari Bol. So Prabhu, when was this GBC and all these things came up? I mean, which year was it? And then the formation, and then the conspiracy happened, and then these things happened, because
it's hard for us to imagine, because nowadays in our lives 5 years goes by as though it's like 6 months, but in those days, in 1 year, so many 60, when I was initiated 68, then 69, then 70, it's like years and years of activities and association with Prabhupada. Everything was packed into those few months. It's almost hard to imagine how it happened.
Okay. Yeah.
So what was your question again?
Prabhu, my question was when this GBC started, and then this.
Oh yeah, the next year.
The structure.
The next year, the GB started in 1970.
Why it was required? Why it was
Huh?
required? Because the organization was spreading at a big pace, and people wanted to have more associations. That's why.
I don't quite understand what you're saying.
What was the main reason behind creating GBC, Pro?
Oh, well, Prabhupada said there's a sinister movement within our society. He said that in 1970. Ramachandra Prabhu? Is he there? Or maybe he's selling books. Okay, there's a sinister movement within our society. And he knew what that was. It was the temple presidents were thinking, we want to take over the movement and run it ourselves. For Prabhupada, of course, but we want to do it for Prabhupada. And how do we want to do it? We want to do it our way for Prabhupada. That's what they were thinking. So when Prabhupada created the GBC, he saw that there was essentially a sinister movement within our society, that they wanted to become more than guru. So he created the GBC to be elected by temple presidents, and the temples were supposed to be individually incorporated. Well, Prabhupada kept asking for the temples to be incorporated individually, and people like Rameshwar and others that had strong connections with lawyers kept saying that they couldn't do it, or it was not practical, or they didn't want to do it like that. In any event, if the temples had been individually incorporated, the GBC would never have been able to control them. Even if they went off the deep end hard. So anyhow, when the GBC was created, 3-year terms, renewable 3-year terms, you could get reelected and reelected. Like a senator in the United States, the Senate is a sign of a republic. The republic means each state has 2 senators, and they go to Washington to manage the interests of each individual state. So Prabhupada created the GBC so that each temple would be represented. 12 GBCs. Each temple would be represented in the by the GBC, so that their interests and their needs could be fulfilled without their freedom and autonomy being taken away from them. That was very important to Prabhupada. 1968, he was asked, are you going to make it like the Catholic Church, a hierarchy? And Prabhupada said, no, we want everything to be on the bottom. Like we would say grassroots or a lowerarchy, we could say, I I got to see that article, but I don't know where it is. But it would be nice to find it, because he clearly said he did not want a hierarchy. Clearly. Oh, the present day GBC will say, well, he changed his mind, or he was there, he never said anything, he didn't kick us out, he didn't make us obey him. No, he used you even though you were no longer really disciples. You disobey the spiritual master, you cease to be a disciple. So he created the GBC for that purpose. They never had one election. We're going to be publishing this in our League for 10K website. It's going to show exactly how the GBC disobeyed Prabhupada and refused to be subjected to election. Then they went out and incorporated ISKCON, not individual temples, but one global corporation centered in Mayapur. And they did not go for three-year elections or any other elections. They went for lifetime appointment. Their own creation.
Hare
People
Krishna,
say,
Prabhu,
well,
I'm very sorry,
Yeah.
Prabhu. I got disrupted. Some important call came up. Can you just repeat again why GBC was created and why all these things happened? Because they wanted, power. And
well,
go ahead.
GBC was created to prevent them from doing what they did, to
Acha,
prevent them
theek hai.
from taking over the movement as individual guys, with their individual kirtans instead of Prabhupada kirtan, their individual dance styles instead of Prabhupada dance styles. They wanted to create, say, a bunch of every temple wanted his temple or big temple to be a movement of its own that would take over Prabhupada without Prabhupada.
Acha.
That's how bad it was. Did we see it at the time? I did. I sort of saw it, but I mean, what are you going to do? They're all doing this in Prabhupada's face.
So, Prabhupada, I have heard a lecture Prabhupada was saying directly for the poison one, that the guy besides my room, he wants to head this and he's poisoned me. Then when people
Yeah.
knew this, he directly said it on face because he was Prabhupada. Prabhupada knows your future, past,
Yeah.
present, future.
Oh, no,
Whatever
no.
you
He was
yeah,
keenly aware that he was being poisoned. It's obvious.
exactly.
Besides, remember, Prabhupada used to own a pharmacy, a
Yeah,
couple of pharmacies,
yeah,
or pharmaceutical company. So it
yeah.
wasn't as though he was a stranger to any of the Ayurvedic or any of the chemicals or arsenic or
No, Prabhu, it's not about Ayurvedic. He's the Paramhansa, right? He was just an example how he made his company and then he went for sannyas. That's an example for us. But indirectly, he's Paramhansa, right? He knows everything, what's going on.
past, present, and future.
Yeah, past, present, and future. So when
Because
Prabhu,
he's a pure devotee. And none of
he-
those other
yeah,
guys that wanted to take his place were even more than neophyte devotees. They were
I think Prabhu,
neophytes. They wanted to take the movement from the Uttama Adhikari, the pure devotee of the Lord. Go
when he
ahead.
said this, Prabhu, when he said this, that these guys are like frivolous or like very much against me, they want to head it and all. Can't at that moment we could have changed it. Certain devotees could have listened to it and just would have gone against all what was happening, right? This
Well,
politics, right?
the point is, which conversations are you talking about? What year did they take place?
When Prabhupada was dying, he was on the in the last 6 months, right?
Yes, but you know that those recordings never came out until after Prabhupada was in Samadhi.
Yeah,
He
there
was
was those
he
things.
was surrounded by his poisoners.
Mm-hmm.
And when he said, someone is poisoning me, Tamal Krishna, the chief brains behind the poisoning, if you
Yeah,
don't want to
exactly.
count Narayana Maharaj as being the chief brains, but Tamal, under Narayana Maharaj's guidance, came up to Prabhupada and said, because he understood that a pure devotee will never act in his own behalf, right? He doesn't have an
Yeah.
ego, no false ego.
Mm,
So he said to
mm.
Prabhupada straight on, in front of in front of a Kaviraj, who is poisoning you, Prabhupada? Who is saying that you are being poisoned? And then Prabhupada did not say, you're poisoning me, you son of a bitch. He never said that to Tamal. An ordinary man would, an extraordinary man, a king would, a nobleman would, a boxer would, a craftsman would, but the pure devotee would not. He is not acting in his own behalf. He said, I'm being poisoned. He said, who is saying? He said, oh, and then Prabhupada responded, oh, some of these, I've heard some of these like voices around me sort of thing. He made it vague. But Tamal knew that he wouldn't say it was you.
Okay.
Of course, Prabhupada knew that Tamal was poisoning him. Prabhupada would, even if he was a mortal man, he would have had to have been pretty stupid not to know that Tamal was poisoning him, considering that Tamal was. But Tamal knew that he was of a humble nature that would never object to being poisoned.
That's the mercy of a pure devotee, guys. This is the point you guys can keep in mind, that
the mercy of a pure devotee is that he's ready to deliver you from repeated birth and death, even while he's being poisoned. But the mercy of the pure devotee is not his being humble. That's not the point. His humility is based on his desire to serve you.
exactly.
The pure devotee, Prabhupada's desire is to serve you. How? By laying down his life so that you will have the chance to chant the Hare Krishna mantra. Does that make sense?
Yeah, bro, it makes sense. But after his demise,
He's not somebody else somewhere else. Consider he's in you right now. He's with you. When you chant, it's Prabhupada inside you.
yeah, bro. But
So go
after
ahead.
his demise, bro, then whatever is happening and whatever has happened, we've talked about it several times. So that could have stopped if Prabhupada could have said it at that moment. I know he was a pure devotee. He was much humbler. He wanted to serve us, and he wanted us to, I mean, just go far this material world and just go to Golok Dham directly, right back to Godhead.
Well, I
That
mean,
I understand.
who would have made a difference in that room? If he had said it, who would have made the difference? Who would have done something? They were all the poisoners. It was a room full of poisoners.
Acha.
Who's going to say, Prabhupada said, someone thinks, let's get that guy. He's standing right there. So's the other guy, the other guy, the other guy.
Prabhu, you're saying in that room there was not a sincere devotee who knew this and who could have blasted it or exploded it directly. They were
Maybe
so
one or
scared of
two, but what
they
could
were
they
so
do?
scared of these guys. Yeah.
There were people that suspected. There were Kavirajas that suspected. One Kaviraj, while Prabhupada was still alive, had a sample of Prabhupada's urine in a jar, in a laboratory.
Yeah.
And he held it up and he pointed to his son, who was also studying Ayurveda. And he said, you see how the urine is separating? That's a clear sign of arsenic poisoning. And then Prabhupada had a special Ayurvedic doctor come in from Calcutta. And he kept asking. The Ayurvedic doctor finally came. The Ayurvedic doctor walks into the room. He sees a group of people saying that they want Prabhupada to be cured. And they see that he can see anybody, if an Ayurvedic doctor would be able to see, oh my goodness, they're the ones that are poisoning Prabhupada. If I say he's being poisoned, they'll kill me.
Prabhu, if he was not poisoned, you were saying on the last lecture that he could have lived for around more than 10 years now. I mean, more than 10 years.
Yeah, but I mean, there was no way he could live because he was surrounded by people that wanted to kill him.
Just for power.
I'm not talking about me. I wasn't there. I was in Los Angeles designing illustrations for his books. I was actually buying a ticket to go to India because I heard that Prabhupada wanted all his disciples to come to India in his last days. Satsvaru, who became one of the gurus, put out an announcement because it was at Christmas time, more or less, the big marathon for selling books. No, Prabhupada wants you to stay back and do the Christmas marathon and make money for the temples. But Prabhupada wanted 5,000 disciples to come to his samadhi. As it was, there was nobody at his samadhi. Maybe 30 people at the most came to his samadhi. My brother, Bhaktimadura Govinda Goswami, who died passed away in Punjabi Bagh in New Delhi, he was put into a samadhi. His samadhi ceremony and the number of people attending his samadhi and the ceremony around it and the people internationally on international Zoom calls was far more than they did for Prabhupada. For my brother, who is not a pure devotee.
Achha.
He was
Because
a
he followed.
sannyasi.
Because he
what
followed,
I'm
because
saying?
because your brother followed these, leaders' rules, right? That's why.
Well, who else would have given him such an honor when he left his body? Yeah, he was a preacher and he brought people to Gopal Krishna Swami. And so Gopal Krishna had a very soft spot in his heart for him. Gopal Krishna has a soft spot in his heart for me, but he knows that I'm very dangerous. So he never could actually reach out to me.
Yeah. There's a video by Ramachandra Prabhu, right? How Gopal Krishna Maharaj became the Maharaj, became the